Hi everyone, Riley Sky 100 here. This video is going to be kind of different because this is going to be kind of off script, and I'm just going to express my feelings about the game you are seeing right now, which is Resident Evil Resistance. Now, if you don't know what this game is, this game was basically like a packing game for the Resident Evil 3 remake, the latter of which I actually enjoyed despite the fact of a bunch of cut content. And as I've learned a few days ago, the producer of that Resident Evil 3 remake, Peter Fabiano, has said out in the open that Resident Evil 3 remake is a finished game product, meaning that there are not going to be any DLCs for that game whatsoever. So any hopes for them to come out with the mercenaries mode for that game, well, it's gone. All of it's gone. And I'm extremely disappointed, especially since I'm not disappointed that they're focusing on their efforts on Resident Evil 8, because I am going to get that game no matter what, but I'm more disappointed by the fact that they're focusing on their efforts on Resident Evil Resistance, a game that, for the most part, doesn't have an original bone in its body. I mean, now, of course, I'm one of those people that was expecting Resident Evil Outbreak to be remade from the ground up. I wasn't expecting a port of the PS2 version to the PC or whatever, but I was expecting it to be remade from the ground up, and it actually would have made sense as opposed to going with Resistance here, because at the time Resident Evil Outbreak came out, both Files 1 and 2, yes, there were two games. There was Resident Evil Outbreak and Outbreak File 2. I think to add a bit more to the story, which was File 2, though I remember the latter of which was like reviewed with less favorably compared to the first game. But I did play those games back when they came out. I didn't own the games. I rented them from Blockbuster when they were still around, and I couldn't get really far into it, mainly because I wasn't a huge fan of like how the controls were at the time. I think they were still trying to make that transition to with like the tank controls and like with all like the rendering 3D environments, which actually started out with Resident Evil Code Veronica, which I'm hoping that they'll remake one of these days, but I don't want them to have that job be done by a different company as opposed to their own, like they did with the RE3 remake, because I don't want there to be a lot of sacrifices with that game, because I'll get into my thoughts about that some other time. But for Resident Evil Outbreak, even though I didn't get really far into either of those games, they were pretty fun. They were ahead of their time, and I only remembered playing online a few times back then, and obviously you can't play online on the PlayStation 2 anymore because Capcom has long since shut down those servers. And I only wish that they did like not only made Outbreak for the PS2 but also for the Xbox, since it was capable of online gameplay. Though I think the choice to go for PlayStation 2 was kind of like an executive or like a decision or something. So the development team probably would have most likely wanted to go try out with Xbox Live, but I guess they didn't have much of a choice. But regardless, it was pretty enjoyable, and if you have the Japanese ISO of it, you can actually still play it online. Though for like the North American version, I think they're probably still trying to work on that. Though I haven't really caught up with it in such a long while, and the most recent I played Resident Evil Outbreak was testing a few PlayStation 2 systems for my guy Larry, who I work with at the flea market on the weekends to repair gaming stuff. And of course, once in a while I'll use that game as a test to go through. I don't really complete the full chapter. I just play about 5 or 10 minutes of it in game just to make sure everything's running well. And it actually surprised me to learn years later that there was a lot of content that was cut from Outbreak, and that would have made a really good opportunity for them to remake Outbreak from the ground up, to implement all those content that were cut, and they would have expanded more on the story. But in the case of Resident Evil Resistance, it's the complete opposite. In fact, I'd say it's not what anyone was asking for, really. So basically, you're playing as a group of 4 survivors, characters of your choosing, and rather than being based in like Raccoon City or something, it's all virtually simulated. So you have 4 survivors against this one person, which is known as the Mastermind. Now you can actually play as the Mastermind, and as the Mastermind, you have to set up traps and other contraptions and such to hinder the survivor's ability to progress. And of course, you can also play as like big monsters, but I'll get into that a bit. So for the survivors, it's pretty much self-explanatory. You have to complete certain objectives and get to the finish without running out of time. Because if you run out of time, or if everyone is dead, then it's game over. And it's nothing that we haven't seen before. In fact, it's been done plenty of times before. One example I like to bring up is Left 4 Dead. In particular, for me, Left 4 Dead 2, because it's actually really enjoyable playing that game online, and most of the times it's really crazy. Because you don't play just the survivors, but in multiplayer you can also play as the monsters. Well, not as the zombies, because they're hordes of zombies that you probably won't even know where your friends are trying to kill you from. But with Left 4 Dead is very memorable because you have hordes of monsters. You're not being hindered at by some sort of voice from above. Just your friends and your partners just making wisecrack remarks, which I always enjoy. I like that kind of humor, but that's non-existent in Resistance. Now, when I say there was a voiceover, and the voice okay, the Mastermind's voice, there's basically, well, I heard there, as of this recording, there's about 3 of them. There's this French guy, which is just as annoying and unbearable as the English voice actress that voiced Zelda in Breath of the Wild. Which one of the reasons I believe why Nintendo allowed you the option to play the game with Japanese language, because some knew that it was going to be unbearable with Zelda's voice actress there, because who asked for Zelda to have a British accent? But I digress. Anyways, the French guy, he just never shuts the hell up. I mean, I believe there is an option where you can turn his voice off, but the fact that they even implemented that voice in the first place, it just, do they really even know what? It just kind of makes me wonder if Capcom was actually listening to us when we asked for an online multiplayer experience with Resident Evil. I mean, I would have loved if they used the RE engine to recreate Outbreak, which would have been a very daunting task given how content heavy the original version of PlayStation 2 was. But oh, there's a message. But yeah, it would have been really interesting if they had took on that task. I'm sure it would have been quite a long journey to go through, but at least it would have been worth the effort. But for Resistance, I don't know. It just, I don't feel the same passion that I get when I play the original Resident Evil games, or hell, even the remake of Resident Evil 2. It just doesn't have that same passion. Sure, it has the RE engine and such, and the graphics are pretty nice, but it's, I have to say again, just because you have amazing looking graphics, that you can't justify having a great game just because it has great graphics alone. If that were the case, then No Man's Sky would be a masterpiece. But I digress. Anyways, yeah, it's just I try to show you that I wasn't being biased. I tried to put in as much time into this game as possible. In fact, I put in I think I remember putting in about 5 or 6 hours into it. And one of the things that was kind of annoying was finding anyone to play with in a comfortable amount of time. Sometimes I'd have to wait like about 3 to 5 minutes or even longer just to load into a match. And I guess it probably depends on the time of day, but even with that, it just kind of shows you that there's just like the fan base is just really kind of like disappointed with this compared to when I binge play the Master Chief Collection on the PC, and I put in 300 hours into that, and I am not ashamed to admit that, but that doesn't mean I play that non-stop for 24/7. And whenever I go into online multiplayer for matchmaking, it takes about less than 30 seconds to get to find like people to play with, depending on if they're brave enough to be in certain modes. Because when it comes to like infection and such, some people just don't like to take that risk or go for other modes. For the most part, for Team Slayer, it's like less than half a minute to find the people to play with, and then boom, you're good to go. But for Resistance, it just takes quite a long time, and I don't even remember like being this bad when it came to matchmaking in Outbreak for the PlayStation 2. I mean, my memory of it, of playing Outbreak on online was vague, but I don't remember it taking that long just to load up a session. Now, I should get into how this game plays. It's kind of bare bones, to be honest. It just feels more compact than I thought it would be. When I first saw the trailer of this, I thought it was going to be a really unique and interesting, but playing it, especially with all the bugs and issues it has, it just didn't really feel fun. It just really kind of worn me out. And they're trying to push this onto us by adding more features to it. And when I say they're trying to add to it, they're just kind of like I don't know. They're kind of taking a long while to do that. Mainly because I believe they're working on Resident Evil 8, which once again I will pick up and play. And I probably will enjoy it because I've heard like leaks of what the story might be like. But I'm not going to get myself spoiled in that right now. So with the game, for the most part, like I didn't really care which character I played as. For the most part, I played this nerdy girl, the one with the yellow sweatshirt and the backpack. Yeah, I thought she was alright, but I did try like other characters after a while, and they played pretty much more or less the same, really. Even with the Jill Valentine, the DLC character you get, though I imagine most players, when they go to matchmaking, they'll try to choose her fast before anyone else can. And even with Jill, it just really didn't change much to the gameplay. It still kind of felt bare bones, really. And with like online interaction with these players, sometimes they'll be able to help you out, while other times they won't even know where they're going. They're just like going in random directions and such, trying to scour away and such. And it's really kind of like difficult to keep track on where they are, because sometimes they'll go ahead, which is to be expected. I've experienced that with Left 4 Dead online sessions, because sometimes people could be could be over their heads that they could just go on ahead without their teammates, and rarely do they ever succeed. But most times they won't even get halfway there. Although it's not as bad as like being in this, it just still doesn't feel as fun, as rewarding as Left 4 Dead. So I'm trying to think about like what else I should talk about before I move on to the mastermind. Oh yeah, you also earn these like rewards and RP boost and to upgrade on yourself and such, but it kind of reminds me of like other modern like first-person shooters like Call of Duty. Though I haven't played Call of Duty since like Black Ops 2, Black Ops 3, and that was with one of my and that was with an ex-girlfriend I was with for a few months, and she enjoyed it, but I really just couldn't get into it. But and for like the weapons, like you actually have to spend like points or money, or what was it, umbrella credits, or what it was. You have to use umbrella credits to get those weapons. So that was kind of annoying, but I could understand that because you don't want to be too overpowering. And it just really didn't have like that kind of like feel with that gameplay that it did with Resident Evil 2 Remake. It just feels, this game just feels kind of rushed. I can feel, especially with survivors, on how bad some of the lag can be, and how underwhelming some of the aspects are. Now, let me move on to the mastermind. Like I said, the default French mastermind is without doubt one of the most annoying characters I've ever had the displeasure of listening to. Is because one of the sins he does is saying Mr. X, or he said Mr. X. I just really didn't like it. Oh yeah, there's also the two other masterminds. There's Annette Birkin, which, surprise, is not the same voice actors that played as Annette in the Resident Evil 2 remake. And now there's Nikolai. And that's fine, but I would have preferred to play as Nikolai in a Resident Evil 3 remake of Mercenary Mode, but because of what they say is now considered a finished project, that's never going to happen. So that's extremely disappointing, but it doesn't matter which mastermind you play as. Your basic goal is the same, really. It's just to prevent the survivors from getting far, and you have all these traps and such, and the tutorial is like kind of like a daunting and kind of intimidating, to be honest, because there's just like all the contraptions they throw at you is kind of overwhelming, and there's room for you to like abuse it to the point where you could just basically kill the survivors before they can get out of the safe room where they're buying up and weapons and supplies, which has happened to me in a few sessions. That has happened to me when I was a survivor, when even when I was trying to buy up like items and like weapons and ammo, the monsters somehow were able to get in, because I always thought it was a save room, which ruins the whole concept of being a save room in the first place. So there's like no safe haven, and sometimes like with the monsters, you go into a bunch of rooms that aren't even like populated with any monsters at all, which kind of feels like wasted assets and resources. So what's the point of making all these rooms if you're just gonna make it have like no use whatsoever? And of course, like I wasn't expecting to put like much use into these rooms anyways, because they're just like kind of like leeways or segues and such, just to find like pieces to open a door or something like that. Now, with one thing I was like interested in Resistance was the fact that you could actually play as like release like monsters and such. In fact, you could actually control Tyrant, or as many people like to call him, Mr. X. So you basically would control Tyrant and just like go around and beat the shit out of the survivors until they're dead. In theory, this sounds actually pretty good. It would have been a contender to be up against the times where you can actually play as the tank in Left 4 Dead online multiplayer. And it's always fun to play as a tank because you have a huge amount of health and just go and kill the survivors until they're beaten dead to the ground. But to be fair, like, he does like die eventually, so it's not invincible by any means. You do have a limit on how much time you can get through before you're actually killed as a tank. But with Mr. X, it just feels, I don't know, it just feels kind of underwhelming compared to what I've seen with like other games, especially with Left 4 Dead. I mean, I thought that playing the bioweapon monsters would be fun, especially Tyrant, but it just wasn't. It just felt kind of lazy, really, and sometimes it'd be just like overpowering to some degree that there's like no fairness in it. And that's also the case with when the Mastermind would spawn regular zombies on top of you when you're already in critical condition. So and that's really like unfair, because in Left 4 Dead online multiplayer, when you're spawning as a monster, you cannot spawn within like a few feet of the survivors. You have to be quite a long distance away from them. And that goes the same thing with when the survivors are still in the safe room. If you can't spawn, even if you're very far away from them, you cannot spawn until they actually open the door that leads them to their untimely doom. Now, I like that Left 4 Dead you can't like spawn on them immediately, because that would be extremely unfair. But for Resistance to allow that to happen, it just really I imagine they fixed it by this point, but it just really doesn't change the fact that this shouldn't have happened in the first place. And it was like, even with the playing as a Mastermind, like trying out these different like traps and such, I just really didn't get a good vibe from it. It just really was not that good. I mean, I know there's gonna be others that disagree with me, but I'm just expressing how I felt throughout it. I've played better online multiplayer games that weren't even survival horror based. I mean, don't get me wrong, I have played other like online multiplayer games that were tons more fun, even back in the early 2000s and such. I mean, I played Halo 3 on the Xbox 360. That was extremely fun because of all the possibilities with matchmaking you could do, especially for creating your own like game mode and such, which I'm hoping will be the case for the PC port of Halo 3, which interestingly enough, a Russian group actually did make a PC port of Halo 3 years ago, though I never actually tried that out, but I remember it actually looked quite amazing. But that's more than I can say for Resistance. I mean, overall, it just really was not good of an experience, and if Capcom insists on pushing this game further to try to make it relevant and try to monetize it, then I might not have much hope for what future projects they'll have up next. I mean, I have like heard like from a leak and such from a Capcom insider that the company does actually listen to their fans. In fact, more so than any other AAA game company on this planet. They probably listen to us more than they should. But if they were actually listening to us, then Resistance would never have been a thing. They would have tried their efforts in remaking Outbreak from the ground up, or something resembling, or something that mimics what Outbreak did. But instead what we get is this virtual simulation matchmaking that just for the most part doesn't have a original bone in its body. And I'm very disappointed that they focus more on their efforts on delivering content for Resistance than improving on Resident Evil 3. especially now that they consider a finished product. So I'm not sure what kind of like a future holds for Resistance. I'm thinking it won't last for, it's not going to last for like more than a year or two. I imagine by the time Resident Evil 8 comes out, or when the new when another Resident Evil remake is announced, that Resistance is probably going to be dead where it stands, really. And I know there are people out there that actually enjoy playing this game, but that's only because they probably don't have the same kind of standards that I do. But even without these standards, you would want to have a fun time playing an online multiplayer game, especially when you're fighting off zombies and such. And that's nothing new, really. Like I said, like online multiplayer fighting off zombies, that's nothing new. It's been done to death before, but at least make it different, make it interesting. What Capcom has done here for Resistance is basically like kind of like the board game Mousetrap, and it's quite the accomplishment when I would rather be playing Mousetrap on the board game than Resistance ever again. And if you kind of share like the same feelings of Resistance that I do, you can forget about removing Resistance from your Steam library, because the game is married to Resident Evil 3 Remake. So if you remove Resistance, it will take Resident Evil 3 with it. And if you want to reinstall Resident Evil 3, you have no choice but to have Resistance in your library. You don't have to install it, but it will not be removed from your library unless Resident Evil 3 goes with it, which kind of annoys me, really, because sometimes I don't like to see Resistance in my Steam library just so I can make room for better games and such. So that's my that's kind of like annoying, but I figure I should bring that up because I don't think a lot of people are aware of that by this point. So yeah, that's my feelings overall. That's my long-winded way of saying I did not like Resident Evil Resistance, and even if they improve on like the issues on this game, it's not going to convince me to reinstall it and replay it, because it just, you have to make a strong first impression with every game you release, and if your impression is not very strong, then what's the point? Then you just lose any hope then you just can't go back to it, really. I mean, sure, like Resident Evil 3 Remake wasn't the strongest first impression, but it was a strong first impression nonetheless. But with Resistance, I just can't see this game succeeding more than a year or two. And I hope that if Capcom, if you're really listening, then please stop giving in to these monetizations for online multiplayer and implementing them with Resident Evil, because this is what's been created as a result. You were most likely better off remaking Outbreak for the ground up. That would have been really awesome to see on the RE engine. That would have set the bar so high for Resident Evil 8 to succeed at that. But who knows? Maybe Capcom might have plans for that one of these days. But if they did remake Outbreak, then they would most likely have to give up support for the Resistance. But yeah, that's pretty much what I want to say about Resistance. I was going to do a more professional video review of this, but I've been kind of like burnt out with like not being able to like work at my personal at my real life job, that it just really doesn't I didn't really care to give this game like a professional review, and I kind of like wish I could have, but I just really wasn't in the mood for it. But nonetheless, I just wanted to get what I want to say out of the way and move on to other projects, as I am like upgrading on my setup just to get more videos done and out of the way. And I will be doing more video reviews very soon. In fact, I have one coming around, which is a PlayStation 3 game called Dante's Inferno. So that will be interesting to look for. But if you made it this far, thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate you listening to me. I wasn't trying to be condescending to anyone that enjoys this game. I just wanted to express my disappointment, and yeah, I just wanted to express how I was not having a fun time with this game. I imagine there's a lot of other people that did as well, because as of on right now on Steam, the reviews of this game are mixed to negative reviews. I wouldn't say mostly negative. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, I will catch you all later. So take care, everyone.